Greetings and salutations, friends. My name is, of course, Charles Quasar Banks, and I'd like to welcome you back to another discussion video as to why I think AAA video game criticism has gotten far too harsh in recent years. So, I'm still sick, so my apologies if I have to clear my throat at any time, or if you can hear that my throat is quite froggy. But I am also sick and tired about hearing about how much better Baldur's Gate 3 is than every other game on the market right now for every reason. Literally every single YouTube page that I see has some video touting how good Baldur's Gate is for AI, for, character design, for map design, for music, for art, for everything else. And this is totally separate than the previous conversations and debates that were being held about the expectations that are set on everything else because of how good Baldur's Gate 3 is. That's totally irrelevant to what I want to talk about. That story, that debate, I think is really stupid because every game developer, whether they are indie game developers or AAA, should be doing their best to appeal to the fans, no matter who those fans are or what the niche is, what the game is. And so, if your game it does not reach the level of quality that Baldur's Gate did, then who cares? It is what it is. The game itself every single game has its own level of quality and should have its own level of expectations based on the goals set by the developers. Larian Studios has been working on this thing for many years, I think between 6 years. I think it's been 6 years, 6 to 10 years. It's been a long time that this game has been in the works. And they've been talking about what they wanted to do with it, the fact that multimillionaires have been spending money trying to get this game made out of their own pockets to get it made. This is not like something that was either crowdfunded or had this massive backing from, a massive series of studios over 20 years that's been building games. They have made games before, but have they made games that appeal to a wide audience, that had gotcha systems, that had loot boxes, that people were unhappy with, and then they apologized and said, we'll do better next time, and then, told everyone that their next game would be the best game ever, the second coming of Christ? The answer is no. Larian Studios did not do that. Guess who did? Bethesda Game Studios, Blizzard Studios, EA Studios. All of those publishers and devs have had those experiences, whereas Larian has not. And so, what am I saying? The point is, Larian Studios did do an excellent job on the game they wanted to create. It is a niche game. It is not a usual AAA game, though it has a AAA budget and AAA everything else. This is not something that we would have expected to be as big or as well done as it is. And it's also made by people who are very passionate about the consumers. They are not a studio that is known for shoveling out crap and highly monetizing it in the past. Bethesda is, and Blizzard are, and so we need to expect that from them. For us to have these standards that every AAA game studio that has been evil, has overly monetized their stuff in the past, will suddenly get better and will be as good as Larian Game Studios at anything that they make, I think is a very, very bad mistake and is setting yourself up for disappointment. Because Starfield was hyped to the stars, literally, by the same people who hyped Fallout 76 to the stars some years ago, and before that, hyped up Fallout 4 to the skies, and then before that, Fallout 3's expansions and DLCs, and same thing with Blizzard. They hyped up Diablo 3 to the skies, had all of these promises, many of which were broken. They did not have dynamic lighting and things like that in the game that they had promised day one. And some of those things are still not in Diablo 3 to this day. And the same thing with Fallout 76, that those games were a disaster. And so those points of history are data points as to what we can expect from those studios today. For us to believe that Starfield would have been completely bug-free, completely without glitches and bugs, to be, for every planet, to be a massive literal planet-sized open world, and there be 1,000 of those, all with interesting content, was completely unreasonable, even if that's what they promised. We know not to believe Bethesda Studios and anything that they say. We just have to wait and see to see what it is that they will come out with, because taking any big game, AAA game studio at their word is obviously far beyond the pale of what they are able to actually do, because their companies are so large, with so many cooks in the kitchen, they can't really focus on something that as well as Larian Studios can, with their vision and their purpose, because Larian Studios did not focus on making a game that would appeal to all people. They did not focus on making a game with, microtransactions and things that Starfield has, like level ups for your skills that require you to go and kill 60 spacers, or in other open world games to go and destroy 50 bandit camps, and then go do 30 convoy missions, and then 60 escort missions, etc., etc. It doesn't have that. It doesn't. It may have an escort mission here and there, it may have, but the variety of Baldur's Gate 3, apparently, I have not played it, is incredible, and people continue to get blown away by it and continue to gush about it. But comparing something with such passion behind it that they actually lost money making to begin with and are now making it back because people love it, that is completely separate and completely different to how we ought to relate to AAA video games. When Diablo 4 came out, I was expecting what we had in the betas, which was very fun, it was very slow, and I knew that they would do things in the live service department that I would be very mad at. And they did, they have, but the base game of that is so fun, and that's all I care about. I do not expect the open world to be the best open world ever. I do not expect it to have, incredible enemy variety. I do not expect it to have incredible dungeon variety, or boss variety, or any of these things that people are mad at, or even endgame variety, with a stout endgame. I did not expect any of that out of Diablo 4. Why? Because I played Diablo 3, and it also, for a long time, did not have any of those things. I would say the present-day version of Diablo 3 has a lot more variety than it did on launch, but does that make it the greatest Diablo game ever? No, Diablo 2 is still far and away the best Diablo game in most sectors, outside of how the hits feel, how gameplay, moment-to-moment gameplay in Diablo 4 feels way better than any other Diablo game created by Bethesda Game Studios, and by any stretch of the imagination. I believe that Diablo 4 feels better to play than any other ARPG I've ever played. Does it have good itemization? No. Does it have good loot chance? No. Does it have good inventory management? No, it doesn't. Last Epoch blows that out of the water. Path of Exile blows that out of the water. But the gameplay of Diablo 4 is all I care about and what I'm happy with. And so for people to constantly be coming onto YouTube saying, Diablo 4 bad, anyone who likes Diablo 4 is just coping because they spent $70 on this game. I was gifted the money to buy Diablo 4. I didn't lose anything on this game, and yet I still love it. And I would rather play it more than other games. Why? Because it appeals to me. And the same thing with Baldur's Gate 3. But the inverse, I am not interested at all in Baldur's Gate 3, because Baldur's Gate 3 does not appeal to action gamers. It does not appeal to people who don't like stories, or dialogue. It's made for the CRPG fans out there that love Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing. And I am not a role player, I am not a Dungeons and Dragons fanatic in any way, and I would much rather just knock around some heads in and slay some demons in Diablo 4's version of Sanctuary. I far prefer that. And that's why I get very, nagged out and frustrated whenever I see things like Diablo 4 and Starfield and other AAA games being compared to Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate and saying, oh, man, there was a recent video called Baldur's Gate 3 ruined Starfield for me. And it's like, are you playing Starfield for the same reasons you would play Baldur's Gate 3? Because if that's the case, I think that's your fault, not necessarily the fault of the game developers. Because as we have seen, they told us it's not going to be 60 FPS, frames per second, on launch or any time soon. It is only going to be 30 FPS. That is a massive letdown for any next-gen gamer, or present-gen gamer, honestly. If a game isn't running at 60 FPS, it is not good enough in this current climate of gaming and the gaming industry. They told us that many months in advance of Starfield coming out. They also told us many things that would have, caused many to despair at the quality of Starfield. But the fact that we were able to know some of those things allowed us to lessen our expectations and say, all right, the game is probably not going to look very good. It's in the creation engine. It's not going to have good frame rate. They're not going for graphical, fidelity. If they were, they would have used a different engine. It probably looks better than most Bethesda games, but in some ways it is exactly the same as other Bethesda games. Like Fallout 4, it probably looks like a slightly polished up, modded version of Fallout 4 in space. And if you liked Fallout 4, you'll probably enjoy Starfield. But, and for me, I look at Starfield gameplay and I'm like, ooh, they got some pretty cool shooty bang bangs. I like the design of the guns. Can I make my own gun? Yes, I can. You can craft your own guns. You can craft your own spaceship. That's exciting. I'm interested in this game for those two reasons. Nothing else matters to me, because I know that AAA game studios cannot be trusted to make a virtuoso video game anymore. There is no reason to think, in this day and age, that AAA game studios will be any better than a slightly wealthy indie game developer. No reason whatsoever. Even just a completely poor sop who's creating new games, the first ever game, they might make and blow out of the water something like Starfield, which has had at least 6-7 years in development, and have made it in a year, and make something that feels better to play, even though it looks like crap. So, the funny thing is, people are willing to give indie games this massive breadth of this gap of being willing to accept whatever glitches and bugs happen because it's a budget game, because it's an indie game. Even if the game feels terrible to play, looks terrible to play, they'll be very apologetic about it. They'll be very forgiving, I should say, about what negative there is that exists in an indie game, whereas they won't be forgiving of a AAA game studio making something that is high quality, but does not appeal to them, or does not have the best of the best in every aspect. And I think this is something in some way hypocritical, because a good game is a good game, no matter how much budget is put into it, okay? If Larian Studios did not have the money to spend millions of dollars on, but they did have the time to program out a good game, even if it looked bad, I think people would still be loving it, and it would blow people away. I don't think it has anything to do with graphics or fidelity or scope or anything like that. A good game is a good game, and if an indie game dev comes out with a mediocre game, I'm not going to praise it because, hey, at least it's not crap. At least it's not Fallout 76. It's like, no, if a game comes out and it's broken and buggy, whether it is an indie game or not, we should criticize it for that. We should also be willing to accept that every game has a different goal, has a different niche, and a different audience. And we can look into that and see what that audience is supposed to be, what those goals are, and what it's trying to do. We can only objectively criticize a game based on what it is trying to do, what is the intention. And as we can see with Starfield, with people criticizing it for not being a fully immersive space simulator game, that was never really the intention, even though they said it was. We need to be able to be intelligent enough to test and discern who is telling me that this game will be the way that they're saying it will be. Are they trustworthy? Do they have a good track record? If not, don't believe anything they say. Okay? Todd Howard, there is no reason to believe anything he says. He is untrustworthy as a human being. I'm sure he's very nice. I'm sure he is incredibly visionary, and people love him in the studios. That's great. He's a good guy. He's a liar. We know that when it comes to his video games. And if anyone was told anything by Todd Howard and they believed it, it's because they either don't know the track record or they were not willing to believe it and wanted to maintain their blissful ignorance, which is not good and definitely has led to many people being quite disappointed in the game. There are people who know and were still disappointed in the game because when the game is too glitchy and buggy for you to complete a quest line that you started, just because someone fell through the planet or fell through the floor, that's disappointing. And it's fine for people to dislike that and to say, this is bad, this is a 6 out of 10 game, maybe a 7 at the most. That's fine. 7 out of 10 games are good. I'll be willing to pay $60 for a 7 out of 10 game, as long as I know what I'm getting into. And so reviews are there for us to know what people are getting into. And with Starfield, I've seen, on the one hand, the fanboys. This is the best Bethesda game they've ever created. It has the fewest bugs. It is so well polished. It has such good story. It has such good gameplay. I've spent hours and hours exploring every single planet, and it is so rewarding to do so. And then on the opposite side, it's the worst Bethesda game ever. This is the worst game I've ever played. You can't really explore any of the planets without running into an invisible wall. There's nothing to see on any of the planets. The quests are boring and buggy. The main quest line and its story is bad, poorly written, bad dialogue, etc., etc. They're saying, basically, that the quality of the same things that they're looking at are the opposite of what the other person is saying. And the thing is, they don't have to be mutually exclusive when it comes to truth. Both things are true, depending on your perspective. If you're someone who wants a Bethesda game and you expect glitches and bugs, and you know Todd Howard was going to be lying about some things and that it was too ambitious, you're going to be pretty happy with Starfield. If you're someone who just came off of Star Citizen or came off of EVE Online and was like, okay, I want to get into the new space game, and you find all of these different limitations, and there's no immersive flight simulation, there's no going into and out of a planet, it's just load screens, you're going to be massively disappointed. And if you've played Baldur's Gate before playing Starfield, and you expected the same level of questing quality, especially the main quest line, you're going to be disappointed in that too. But that's a very subjective thing as well, because sometimes you just like a storyline for different personal reasons, even though its writing may objectively be worse than something like Baldur's Gate. So, I'm just saying, what my point is that the people who are enjoying Baldur's Gate 3 are enjoying it not because it's the best game in every circumstance. Maybe it is. But it's because they did not have improper expectations based on who was making it. They had no reason to believe it was going to be the best game ever made. It's just that when the news came out of what they were doing, 172 or 73 hours of cutscenes, 200,000 lines of dialogue, and they get excited for that, and then they see that in the game, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so good. Because it's what I wanted, it's what they said it would be. And so, Starfield, it looks fun to me. And I'm sick and tired of people saying, oh, Baldur's Gate is so much better, it just ruins Starfield. Does it really? Does it really? What are you expecting Starfield to be? What are you expecting any video game to be? People saying that the facial animations of Baldur's Gate 3 blow Starfield's NPCs out of the water. Okay, that's fine. That's like me saying, well, the NPC dialogue in Dark Souls blows Armored Cores out of the water. Why don't the MTs have facial animations? It's a different game. You're expecting different things. Dark Souls is more story-driven than Armored Core. Armored Core has a more straightforward storyline. Dark Souls has a more open-ended one. You cannot expect the same things from every game. And if you do, then you are bound for disappointment. And we need to stop criticizing off of this hidden metric in our own minds that everything needs to be perfect, everything needs to be well done, because it's not going to be. For every game that it is, huzzah, praise it to the skies, but don't say, because Baldur's Gate 3 is so good, this makes everything else bad. Don't say, Starfield is bad because it's not Baldur's Gate 3. It wasn't intending to be. And even though they said it might have been, even if that was their intention at one point, the fact of the matter is that the game is different no matter what anyone has said. And we need to judge each game based on what it is, not what it isn't. So what is good about Starfield? What is good about Diablo 4? What is good about anything? We need to be focusing on those things and focusing on what could have been done better to achieve the actual goals that the game seems to be trying to achieve. Because as far as I'm concerned, Diablo 4 is perfect for what it's trying to achieve. Moment-to-moment gameplay being satisfying. Done. 10 out of 10. Would recommend for people who are interested in hitting demons. Would I recommend it to people who loved Path of Exile and want more depth out of a different game? No, not at all. I'm going to play Starfield and enjoy it as much as I can. I won't expect much out of it. I'll probably wait for a sale. But I'm not going to buy Baldur's Gate 3 because it's been praised to the stars, because I'm not interested. And I think we need to quit expecting good things out of AAA game studios because they have proven that they cannot do it. Okay? So let's lower our expectations for all AAA games, and then maybe we can actually enjoy them. We don't have to just boycott every game that comes out of the AAA game studio as being immoral because it doesn't rise to the standards that they hype it up to be. It's obvious that the intelligence of the consumer needs to rise to the occasion of seeing what the industry really is, that it is a muddled mess, and that anyone can make a bad game, no matter how much money you pour into it. Not anyone can make a good game, and those games are rare. And it takes lots of money, and lots of time, lots of effort, lots of passion, and a visionary to keep it on the right tracks. Obviously, AAA game studios do not have that. I would not say that Starfield is a visionary game with more ambition than any other game. No Man's Sky already did everything that Starfield sets out to do, way better than it did. Even if it doesn't have the same quest design or NPCs or storyline. Maybe Starfield has a better story than No Man's Sky. I have not played Starfield. Can't say, but moment-to-moment gameplay is truly all that matters, in my mind. And so I'll see how the shooting feels, and I'll be the judge of whether or not it's good. But I don't know. Maybe I just need to tune my YouTube recommendations more to get less Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah, so I guess that's all I wanted to say. I just feel that Starfield is getting a bad rap for being what it is. And honestly, if you didn't expect it to be what it is, that's your fault. And anyone for whom Starfield is a good game, they're not wrong. Anyone for whom Starfield is a bad game, they're not wrong either. We just need to stop calling each other out for being liars or being evil for liking a game or being wrong for liking a game. If you like a game, that's great. That's lovely. There are people who love games that I hate. I'm not going to tell them they're wrong or that their game sucks. I just don't like games that I feel are boring. And maybe Starfield will be boring when it comes out, but not because it's not as good as Dark Souls or Ocarina of Time or Bloodborne or games that I actually enjoy. I don't need to tear down Red Dead Redemption 2, a game I don't like, because it's not Dark Souls. I just don't have to play it. Even if it is one of the highest rated games of all time, it's not for me. And that's okay. Alright? So go ye forth in grace and peace, and enjoy the games that you enjoy, and stop criticizing others when they enjoy a game that does not meet up with the same metric that any other game has set for itself. The standards will be different for every game, and we don't need to lower standards so that, AAA games can get away with what they're doing. We need to lower our standards because I don't want to be disappointed in playing a AAA game. I don't want to have a game come out, hyped to the skies, play it, expect it to be as good as it was hyped to be, and then be disappointed. If I'm going to play a game, it's because I think it will be fun. Not because some YouTuber told me it would be. I'm not going to avoid something that YouTubers told me is the worst game ever made just because they said it. I have to make my own decision on that, based on gameplay, based on visuals, based on sound effects. And I wish everyone had this same mentality, because there'd be a lot less debate, there'd be a lot less argumentation, there'd be way less fighting. And I'm just tired of this whole Baldur's Gate nonsense, and Diablo bad nonsense, and Starfield bad. And hey, Bethesda is really bad at making well-polished games. We all know that. And that's not good. But they're not changing their tune anytime soon. And if you don't like buggy games, if you're really, really someone who hates bugs, and it just ruins the experience for you, don't buy Starfield. You're not going to enjoy it. Okay? That's all you need to say. You don't need to say, oh my gosh, Baldur's Gate is so good, every time something bad happens in Starfield. And I'm not trying to gatekeep anyone from doing that. It's just really annoying that it does happen. Because this could all be avoided if we just critiqued games based on their own merits, without reference to other games, if that makes sense. I've appreciated all the different takes that Starfield has gotten in reviews, but it doesn't at all seem to be in any way objective. Like, Luke Stevens has given the good and the bad, but he's mostly focused on the bad, because he thinks there is more bad than good in Starfield. But the gameplay is good. There's no one who has said that the gameplay in Starfield is bad. However, on the other side, ACG praises Starfield to the skies as if there's almost nothing wrong with it. He does say a couple of things that are wrong with it, but everything else he says is great. Whereas someone else like Asmongold or others would say, it's not really a game for me, and it's so glitchy, it's a bad game. And they're all right, but no review has ever really given all the truth, and I think that would take like an 8-hour video. So we cannot really rely on one streamer, one YouTuber to give us the full story. And maybe it's just that I have too much faith that the people on the internet will be intelligent enough to make distinctions based on who's who in the game industry. I think that there's so many indie games that are so much worse than Starfield, or so much worse than Diablo 4, that get higher ratings. And I'm like, this is an injustice. This is horrible. This is horrible. And this ought not to be so. We need to be thankful for what we do get out of the AAA industry, because they're a bunch of, what would you say, business tycoons, not game makers at this point, mostly. I was floored when, in Diablo 4 interviews, I can't remember who it was, the big guy with the white beard and white hair, who's kind of the front of Blizzard for Diablo 4 these days. He's basically admitted that when asked about why can people not expect Diablo 4 to be better than every Diablo game combined because it's had such a pedigree, so many people having worked on so many of these games in the past, why can't they just recreate that same magic? And he basically just said, most of the people who made those Diablo games aren't with the company anymore. They're just a few people who've ever worked on a Diablo game, and most of the people who are employees have never worked on a video game before. He literally said, if you had a show of hands for people for whom this was their first video game, Diablo 4 was their first video game, half the room would raise their hands. And I'm like, are you insane? You're having people for whom their first video game is Diablo 4 working on this, like, massive title with a huge lineage and history behind it. But that's how big the business is. They're not Diablo 4 is not a passion project by one visionary who spent his whole life trying to make it happen. This was a business venture, and there are some people, like a few people, that are really passionate about the overall game, but most of it is just being made by small pawns and cogs in the machine that are layering on tiny bits by tiny bits, and the machine is putting every bit together like a Frankenstein monster. And so we cannot expect AAA games to be as good as a virtuoso visionary director, okay? I know I've been repeating myself a lot during this video, but I really want to hit these points because I think it is worth saying in many different ways. What I've been seeing these days is just that the AAA gaming industry is getting close to bursting, because the criticism for every AAA video game is so negative unless it has the quality of Baldur's Gate 3. And I don't think that's fair. I think people's expectations for what a Nintendo video game are never really, no one is truly ever disappointed in any Nintendo game, because Nintendo has not increased the bar that much, or made things far too ambitious and then had to retrace their steps. They've basically just said, we're making children's games mostly, we're making it for people who are on the go, the Nintendo Switch is their mainline console, and it has worse graphics than an Xbox 360. So, those are the expectations. No one is griping too much about the bad graphics of TOTK, Tears of the Kingdom, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Maybe there are some people who are saying, hey, it looks exactly like Breath of the Wild, the color palette is not as good, but, the fact that it is not trying to be the best-looking game ever made means that our expectations for its visuals has to be lower. And Nintendo set those expectations. I think the thing is, Nintendo is very good at setting expectations. Its marketing has never truly been completely untrustworthy or deceptive about what it does. It's simply been pretty honest. And most AAA game studios just want the hype. They want to sell copies based on hype, and it is our duty as critical thinkers and consumers to not live off of hype. And also not to live off of the negativity of other people trying to bring down the man, the industry, based on principle. That, I think, is also a mistake. Both are two sides of the same coin. Both of them fall off a cliff. One for believing too hard in the hype. The other believing too hard in the hateful, negative comments of modern critiques. And it's kind of strange. IGN used to be super harsh on games until it was super harsh on games for no good reason, and then people stopped believing them at all. And then now, they're basically giving like 8 to 9 out of 10s to every single game that comes out. And people are pretty happy with that. Because they're tired of hearing poorly trained journalists criticizing games for them not being able to play them. And so IGN has actually gotten better at review and making things that will at least appease the fans of the games, even if they're not as critical as they could be. Whereas actual YouTubers and streamers are coming out with these massive takes that Diablo 4 is bad in every way, it's the worst Diablo game, Starfield is the most glitchy, buggy game ever made, and it's just havoc. It's just havoc. And I just want to put it out there that we can be a little bit more discerning than that. We don't need to put down the entire AAA gaming industry into the dust. We don't need to boycott anything unless we just don't like the game. If we don't like the game, it's fine. Don't play it, don't buy it. But there's no reason to just keep kicking the stinking dead horse. Fact is, Bethesda is good at making what they are good at making. And they're good at making very glitchy, open-world games with really janky dialogue and some really emotional and yet cloying, cringy storylines with some pretty okay combat that does the job. That's what I expect from Starfield, and I expect not to be disappointed in that when I go and play it. And with the same can be said of anyone, really. Just look at what they do, look at what they have done, and if they're trying to hype it to the sky, you don't believe the hype. And if you truly don't enjoy it, you can say that you don't enjoy it for those reasons, but maybe it's just not the game for you. Anyway, I've talked for way too long. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you, fare thee well, and remember, the good Lord loves you, and so do I. Goodbye, goodbye, thank you, goodbye. Let me know your take on modern gaming criticism in the comments below. Till next time, farewell.